They ripped out my father's bridge at sunrise, splintered it like it was trash, and I stood there on the bank, rain in my face, tasting sawdust and old grief, while a line of contractors in neon vests pretended not to hear me asking for 5 more minutes with the last thing he ever built. And I still smiled because they had no idea what was coming next. No idea who I really was, no idea how long I'd been waiting for this exact storm to roll in. Let me back up a sec. 3 years ago, I bought the cheap house in Silverwater Cove, cheap being $750, which sounds like a joke until you see the neighbors. 12 glassy lakefront palaces sitting shoulder to shoulder like a magazine spread for people who collect watches they never wear. And then there's my place, a modest 2-story on a little rise with a backyard that slips down to the water. No infinity pool, no sculpture garden, just a wooden footbridge. My dad and I once talked about turning into a place to fish at sunset. The previous owner warned me at closing, said the HOA here ate people alive. Said their president, Victoria Hale, used to be a federal prosecutor, slick as rain on granite. Loved a bylaw the way some folks love a hymn. And I nodded like I'd never met the type before. Like I wasn't already 3 years deep in public records, permits, drainage diagrams, pump specs, soil, surveys, everything a man needs when he intends to live in a bowl that stays dry only because steel and electricity say so. That bridge, the one they bulldozed, wasn't just a hobby. It was the last thing my dad finished with his hands before he didn't pass. That's too gentle. Before he quit on a world that let people like Victoria turn neighborhood rules into a business plan. He carved MC plus EC into the railing, told me someday we'd pull base there the week I graduated. You know what I mean? One of those sentences you keep in your pocket for the days you need to believe in someday. And then the man hung himself in our garage after a different HOA scam, bled us dry. Same playbook, different zip code. Week 3 in Silverwater. And I get the letter, heavy paper, gold crest, all the theater, unauthorized waterfront structure, aesthetic standards, $5,000 per day, and an emergency meeting at the clubhouse that felt like a sentencing 11 mansion owners in a semicircle, expensive cologne and colder smiles, and Victoria up front in a suit that could make a jury plead guilty just to go home early. "Mr. Cruz," she says, voice like a sharpened letter opener. "We all value tradition truly, but community standards are non-negotiable. Remove the bridge or face escalating fines." And then Graham Whitfield, hedge fund guy, the kind who calls waiters boss, leans in and goes, "Evan, let's be frank. Your parcel is prime redevelopment, $2 million bare minimum. We'll float you $900 today and handle removal for you." I look like a man being gently drowned, shaky. Voice eyes on my shoes. This is a lot to process. Yeah, that happened. I asked for 48 hours to consider to consult an attorney to honor my dad by at least trying. And Victoria smiled like a cat that hears the can opener. Here's the part they didn't hear, because people like that never listen. When a blue-collar shirt is talking county water systems, I mentioned casually when we filed out. Nothing glamorous, just pumps and pipes, keeping it all flowing. Nobody asked the follow-up. Nobody ever does, like how a county specialist on emergency authority could afford a house in their tax bracket. Like why I'd picked a lot that sat just a hair higher than theirs. That night I ran my hand over my father's initials, whispering the promise I'd been building toward for 15 years, justice. Not fireworks, not chaos, just physics and patience. Then I dismantled the bridge myself, plank by plank, rain soaking my shirt. Victoria watching from her wall of glass like she'd finally found the off switch on a problem named Evan. At 10 the next morning, Lena Ortiz knocked with a folder and a look that said she'd been waiting for this day almost as long as me. Lena's the agent who sold me the house, the kind of woman who can read a room at a glance and a balance sheet at a run, and she had her own scars from Victoria. She killed a sale on a black surgeon, Lena said, tossing bank statements on my table, called him not a fit. She cost me 60 grand for being a bigot in pearls. Then she slid me the good stuff. Victoria owes $12 million to her development partners, 30 days to deliver a lakefront resort. or she's toast. If desperation had a scent, you could have bottled it right there on my kitchen counter. Meanwhile, across the cove, Victoria's private investigator was mailing her a report with my resume in it. MIT Army Corps of Engineers, Senior Water System Specialist for the County Emergency Authority to modify infrastructure during flood risk access. Logs. Certifications, the whole quiet sword under the cardigan, and that made her nervous but not smart. See, Silverwater Cove is a postcard built in a bowl, what used to be wetland, made presentable by diesel and electricity. Lovely lawns. Sure, but all of it held up by pumps that never sleep. The mansions didn't beat the lake. They rented victory by the hour, and the landlord's name was Physics. And whose key ring kept those pumps humming? That'd be me. A storm started forming in the Pacific, 10-day track. Ugly colors, the kind of thing meteorologists phrase like apologies, and while Victoria escalated violation notices, gossip, emails, concerned citizen calls to my boss, I did my rounds with a clipboard and an official jacket, logging pressures and flows, filing routine maintenance orders with language only an engineer would bother to read, optimize surge capacity, mitigate transient pressure, nothing illegal, nothing, even flashy, just the sort of small adjustments that look like good stewardship and become something else when the sky opens. We tested the system during a quick midweek deluge, 3 inches of water in Victoria's basement, just enough to ruin a Persian rug and spike her blood pressure. I arrived in a county truck like a sitcom punchline. Boot prints and concern. Ma'am, these older pumps can get overwhelmed during heavy precipitation. I'll make adjustments. We'll get ahead of it. And she watched me like a snake watches a rake. Hired an engineering team for 2 days. Let them crawl through ducts and diagrams. They found wear and tear. Recommendations for upgrades that cost money she didn't have. And time she couldn't spare, nothing else. Graham tried the soft thread at my cubicle. Careers are delicate. Evan, it'd be a shame if yours developed a reputation for instability. And I smiled like a man thinking about where water goes when nobody asks it to appreciate the advice I said, and noted his shoes for later, because leather hates a flood more than people do. That night I called my supervisor, logged in official risk memo models projecting severe flood potential in the Silverwater Basin during the forecast event, requested authorization for preventive measures all by the book, all time stamped. Because if we were going to do this, we were going to do it the way my dad taught me to do, everything precise, patient, clean. Then the twist. I didn't expect Victoria's husband Daniel voice shaking at 2 a.m. I can't do this anymore. She's been running variations of this scam for years. I have server credentials, recordings, wire transfers. I'll hand you everything if you keep me and the kids out of it. He wasn't a hero, but he wasn't a villain either. Just a man who'd realized being married to a hurricane didn't make him weatherproof. Lena took the files, made backups, looped in a quiet contact at the bureau who'd been circling Victoria for months. Wire maps, bribe ledgers, emails from shell companies, and while the case agents started sharpening their knives, Victoria sprinted to court with an emergency petition to paint me as a public danger, unstable threat to infrastructure. Lots of adjectives, not much evidence. The judge read my credentials, read the weather bulletin, looked over her glasses and said, "Petition denied." And that right there was the last legal door she had to slam in my face. 12 hours before landfall, she hired private security cameras, night vision, the whole bad movie package. Graham buzzed my driveway in a rain jacket that cost more than my truck. "We'll be watching," he said, like the lake was going to ask his permission, and I could have laughed if I didn't taste lightning on the wind. What Victoria thought she had on me was a copy of my father's note. Daniel had hidden it. She'd found it, the words about the bridge, the lake, the dream that someone would make people like her stop. She believed it proved premeditation, and maybe it did, but it also proved the bridge wasn't a structure, it was a memorial. Grief is evidence too, just a different kind. The storm hit at 8 walls of water that turned the streetlights into small suns and the gutters into rapids. I moved like a metronome through the rain in my county gear, locking out what needed locking, opening what needed relief, documenting actions in real time, radio crackling while I spoke in the calm tone people trust when the world gets loud. Cameras caught exactly what I wanted them to catch: a public servant inside his lane, doing the job he's paid to do, making 1,000 tiny choices that looked like protection and added up to inevitability. By midnight, the lake had climbed, the pumps had rhythm, the backups had theirs, the system did what systems do when too many rare conditions shake hands at once. One failure cascades into 6 readings. Look normal until they don't: alarms. Prioritize the wrong thing because someone told them to in a maintenance script last week. And then the lake remembers its name. At 2 a.m., Victoria stepped into cold water on her bedroom floor, silk pajamas, eyes wide, phone to ear, screaming at Graham, who was hip deep in his own garage, saving a painting while a Maserati bobbed behind him like a very expensive pool toy. Lena sat beside me in the truck headset on logging timestamps because we weren't just doing this. We were proving how it hadn't been done illegally. By 4, Silverwater looked like it had never been drained. 11 mansions wearing the lake like a coat. Lights flickering under the surface. Garden lanterns glowing like shipwrecks. And my house, right where I'd chosen it for the grade, and the distance from the main return sat dry as a sermon. The optics, as the PR people say, were perfect. The modest place on the hill, the man in the county jacket, the hero shot. Nobody realized I'd lit 3 years ago. At 6, I arrived to assess and mint it. People were scared. And no matter what they'd done to my father or to me, fear is still human. We moved folks to high ground called utilities. Shut down, breakers did the work. The local news wanted a quote, and I gave them one my dad would have liked. No one deserves this. We'll rebuild better. We'll learn what the water taught us. You could smell the smoke from Victoria's dreams from across the basin. Development partners yanked funding before breakfast. A federal case opened by noon. Accounts froze before dinner. Graham tried. Switzerland discovered airports are where rich men learn the phrase, "Please come with us." The insurance investigators came like a parade: clipboards, questions, cautious looks, and all they found were facts that fit. Storm severity, matched models, equipment, logs showed lawful adjustments, wear patterns mapped to age and load. The story wrote itself without me touching a single sentence. And the neighborhood, man. The neighborhood changed. Prices dropped to something regular. People could reach. Nurses and mechanics and teachers moved in. Kids on bikes, where Range Rovers used to idle block parties instead of silent driveways. Lena closed more deals in a month than she had in 2 years and swore to keep it ethical, even when a developer waved a blank check. We're building community, not portfolios, she told me at sunset on the new dock, and the way the water held the sky made me want to believe her forever. There was one more scene, though. There always is. The dedication of the new bridge, bigger and stronger, cedar and steel, a plaque that read, "For the families who were told to leave May home, choose them back." And in the crowd, I caught a profile that hit me like a flashbang. Uncle Ray, my dad's little brother, retired Fed, hadn't seen him since the funeral. I thought Victoria had lured him to scold me, to call me reckless, to say justice isn't yours to shape. Instead, he hugged me hard and whispered, "I've chased Victoria's paperwork for 15 years, kid. You did in one night what the system couldn't do in a decade. You didn't cheat physics, you just let it tell the truth out loud." Victoria's sentence landed months later. 18 years restitution. A lecture from a judge who looked tired of rich people calling theft governance. Daniel divorced her and handed over the last cache of files. Graham lost everything he couldn't hide before the extradition papers hit. And me, I got a promotion I didn't ask for and a raise I didn't need, because sometimes the universe tidies up the ledger on its own. One last thing. The text that pinged Victoria's phone in the disaster shelter while the news replayed my interview. 5 words that froze her. "Justice flows like water." She thought my father sent it. How could he, right? He'd been gone 15 years. But grief makes you see ghosts and signal. Truth is, I'd scheduled the message a long time ago to fire when sensors hit levels that meant the basin had reclaimed itself. Was that petty? Sure, was it poetry, maybe? Was it closure? Yeah, it was that too. People ask if I regret anything if I lost sleep. If the line between heroic emergency response and revenge kept me up nights, and I tell them the truth, I slept just fine because I didn't cheat the world, I aligned it, I didn't burn a thing. I let water return to the shape it always wanted. I honored a man who taught me to fix what's broken and stand up when people with clipboards and soft hands say, "Sit down." And then I rebuilt a bridge with my neighbors, carved EC plus MC under the rail where only I can find it. Took a breath and let the lake keep its secrets. You can call that vengeance, you can call it justice, you can call it a flood with good PR, but stand on that bridge at dusk, feel the boards hum with kids running. Hear the grill pop at the cul-de-sac, watch the porch lights wink on one by one across houses regular people can finally afford. And tell me this, if the law can't protect a community from people who weaponize the law, what would you do? Where would you draw the line, and who would you trust with the switch when the sky turns black? If that makes you mad, if it makes you cheer, if it makes you argue about right and wrong and what HOA should be allowed to do, tell me, drop your take on justice. Below where you'd stand, what you think fair looks like when power leans on the small. And if you want more stories where the little guy learns the system and pushes back without lifting a fist, stick around, share this with the one neighbor who needs to hear it, and meet me on the bridge next time where the water's talking and we're finally listening.